guys, how are you? I have a video for this week. Yes, I actually got my book finished. It's been some time. So I got my book finished and that's what I've got for you. It's another Alasdair Gray. I know, we like Alasdair Gray here. It was well worth the wait though. I gotta tell you that. Right, but before we get to that, remember, if you want to support us, there is our shop where we have books and writing services. There's also our Redbubble shop where we have over 100 designs. I'm still working on that new one. If you want to support us but you don't want to spend any bread, that's totally cool, man. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. So that's that out of the way. What are we talking about? Well, we are talking about probably Alasdair Gray's most controversial novel. I think that would probably be safe to say, purely because of the content. And I'm going to have to be really careful with the cover of this because it's his homage to, I think it's Leonardo da Vinci's Ecce Homo. But I don't think YouTube likes genitals, so I'm just going to cover that up with my finger. But we're doing 1982 Janine, which is probably one of the more experimental novels that, like, far more experimental than Lanark, which with its, we've done that, all its weirdly dislocated narrative. It's more experimental than Poor Things. It's more experimental than The History Maker. This one's a bit of a slog to read in terms of, until you get used to it. Like, it can feel a bit like, whoa, what did you put me in? I'll get to what makes it kind of difficult to read, because he's not making it easy for you. And the reason he's not making it easy for you is because our narrator is determined not to make it easy. So what is this about? Well, this is about a man named Jock McLeish. It all takes place one night in a hotel room. Jock McLeish is in his late 40s. He's a supervisor in a alarm systems company. He's divorced. He's an alcoholic. And we meet him in a hotel room where he is finishing off the whiskey that he has and indulging in very, very explicit sexual fantasies. We get to watch his very explicit sexual fantasies. Now, interspersed with these fantasies, what the whiskey can't drown and what the fantasies can't distract him from, we get intimations of this man's life. We know that he was married. We know that his marriage was loveless. We know that he had a great friend when he was at technical school in Glasgow. We know he's from Glasgow. We know he is very well thought of in his company and that he is hiding the fact that he is an alcoholic. We know that he has some pretty big regrets in his life. And we know that he has probably hit the absolute rock bottom at this point. This is rock bottom for him. There is no further he can go. He is trying to avoid the realization that he has hit as low as he can possibly go through the alcohol and the sexual fantasies. He is a working class boy made good. He is now in the middle classes. He affects conservative Tory politics in spite of the fact that his father was a left-wing idealist. His mother and his father have split up, and his mother left her husband for another man whom she met when she was visiting relatives in New Zealand. We know that he has regrets about this. We know that his father is dead. All of these things we learn at interspersed with these wild sexual fantasies. And as you're reading this first part of the book, you think, oh, so it's like the Marquis de Sade. It's like reading the Marquis de Sade, where you have the very explicit sexual element, and then you have the philosophy. I'm going to put that in quotations because the Marquis de Sade's philosophy is pretty darn nihilistic. And I think the only way you could get anyone to pay any attention was with all the sex, you know. McLeish is different. Jock McLeish is using the sex, and he's using just the same way that he's using the alcohol to avoid looking at his reality. And in the middle of the book, we get this in chapter 11. In chapter 11, I'm not sure if you can see this, but the typeface changes. And this is probably the most challenging part of the book to read, because there are three voices. There is McLeish's sexual fantasies, there is how he is physically feeling, and then there is God. He invited God in at one point, and God is this tiny little voice who is speaking to him, but he can't be easily heard over the roar of this sexual fantasy and the physical discomfort of his body, because he gets to a point at the end of chapter 10 where he can't, everything he's using to avoid isn't working anymore. There's a glass full of whiskey left, and there is a bottle with 50 pills in his pocket, and he takes the pills. He takes the pills, and the reason we get this really discordant, it's like a discordant harmonies, three people all talking at the same time to create this discordant music. You can sort of imagine what it would sound like in an auditory situation. You would have the very loud, his body, cold, hot, pain, this monotonous, and the sexual stuff does become monotonous. It becomes monotonous to a point that you'll start, as a reader, you're like, okay, yeah, look, you're not going to shock me anymore, because, like, frankly, I don't believe you. I don't believe your fantasies. I don't believe you are actually this person, because you keep saying you're not. Or you keep insisting that you are to such an extent, and yet the hints that you give, you're not. And so I don't believe this. You're lying. You're lying to yourself. And then you get God, who is whispering, and then finally he hears God's voice, and he throws up the pills. He throws everything up. And then we get the story. Then we get the story of this man and what has led him to this, the events of 30 years earlier. We get this story of this man 30 years earlier, and what happened when he was in his late teens, when he was in technical college, how he ended up in the loveless marriage, how he ended up through youth and an inability to understand what he was doing, and selfishness, to hurt the person who he really truly loved and who truly loved him. How he lost a friend. All these things that have created this horrible, painful nexus that he has spent the past 30 years trying to hide from. And that's the other half of this book. This is a book that starts out as callous pornographic fantasy and avoidance and ends up a dark night of the soul. It's something that it pushes you away as a reader. That's what the pornography is there for. It is to push you away, to keep you arm's length. I do not want you getting close to me. I don't want you getting close to me. I don't want to have to confess this to myself. And when there's nothing left, he's forced to. And that's when we get this interesting story. Alasdair Gray said when he was writing this, he really, really had to dredge up some of the most, appalling stuff that he could think of for Jock's fantasies. And that he did it and then he never touched that again. And he does this really, it is done really, really well. Because there is a certain... the fantasies tell you as much about the character as the other half of the story. That's the part of it that makes it really interesting, is you can't just go, oh, I'll skip straight to the middle then and read from chapter 11 onwards. No, it doesn't work like that. You cannot read it as like separated from themselves, because the fantasy tells you something about him. It tells you something about him. It tells you about who he is and who he thinks he has to be. He thinks he has to be this sort of a man. He's not that sort of a man at all. He is a man who does not want to be that, but who is living and thinks that's what he has to be. He's trying to be something. He has an ex-girlfriend who was very interested in sort of hearing all his fantasies and then putting them into a sociological or psychological framework. Sontag is really interesting. There is he has very few relationships with other men. He is very alienated. He's drawn to women. He is drawn to women, but he finds them very hard to engage with. But he also equally finds it very hard to engage with men. He can do so socially. He can do, socially, work socially. But you get that as you're reading, you realize that he doesn't have close relationships with people. He desperately wants close relationships with women. Sontag mocks his villains for being kind of pathetic. And they are kind of pathetic. His villains are very, they're pathetic. They're not real villains. They're not, the pleasure that they take is a dominating, yes, but at the same time it's kind of puerile. It's like, this is kind of sad and pathetic. It's a child. It's a notion of power that belongs to a teenage boy, and you really get a sense that this man has all these fantasies. He's been stuck at this point in his late teens, and that when you read the other half of it, you understand why he has been stuck in his late teens, why he is so sexually rubbish.
Hi, just adding this in because this was a like a 4 a.m. thought. The sexual fantasies, Jock McLeish is not only taking the role of the men, I realized he's also taking the role of the women. He is everyone. He is both wanting to be dominant and also realizing he is in a subservient and dominated position. And you don't see that till you see the end of the book. The end of the book gives you that level of understanding, which I think is it was a really interesting sort of thing that I didn't realize until I sort of woke up and thought, oh, I should have said that. So there you go. I've said that now. Back to the video.
But you also get, by the time you get to the second half of the book, you get the other side of the fantasy. You get the side of the fantasy that is, yes, he espouses conservative things because that is what the level of society he has managed to claw himself into expects of him. What's his reality? His reality is he's a utopian. He believes that there is a possibility of a better world, but everyone is too selfish and mean and greedy to make that happen. And so if everyone is too selfish and greedy and mean to make that happen, then you may as well be one of them. He doesn't really want to be one of them. He at heart, he is a man who sees technology and sees what he is doing as something that could, if we were better people, lead to a much better life, a much better world, a world where we don't need to keep grasping and competing with one another. And so he has all these internal contradictions, but talking about this and raving about this is another way of deflecting from, I did this horrible thing. And when you read the horrible thing, it's like, oh, sweetheart, you were 17 or 18. Everyone in that situation did stupid things, did cowardly things, did things that they would regret. Yes, perhaps these had slightly more impact than what a lot of other people get up to at 17 or 18. But you're holding yourself to a standard that no one would hold a teenager to. What do you know of the world? What do you know of other people? What do you know of yourself at that age? That is that becomes like the crux of that is, and that's ultimately why this is a dark night of the soul, because the end of a dark night of the soul is enlightenment. A dark night of the soul is not bleak, it has an uplifting ending. This has an uplifting ending. So you go through all of this stuff, all of this self-delusion, all of this inadequacy, all of this ridiculous fantasy world, all of these different ways that a person can distract themselves from what they actually should be recognizing. And it becomes, it made me think, especially as he was talking about the more utopian qualities. Now, this is from the early 80s, and the early 80s, very much still Cold War, very much still the bomb, very much still, well, we can annihilate ourselves. Not that that's gone away, but let's not think about that. And because that's that that context, you get this sense of, you see how McLeish uses politics, uses economics, uses expectation to distract himself from what's actually important. Because all those things seem important, but when you are a nothing, when you are an ordinary person, and let's be frank, we're all ordinary people who really don't have any major power, worrying about these things is really just a way of distracting ourselves. And we do the same thing today. It's no different today. We look at the world, and I think social media has made this so much worse. So much worse. You go on, I go on things and look at stuff, and it's like, wow, you're screaming at each other over stupid things. The moment everyone's in my feed is screaming at each other over interpretation of Greek mythology. Didn't have that on my scorecard. People arguing over interpretation of Greek mythology. And what's interesting, people arguing over interpretations of Greek mythology who don't know a great deal about Greek mythology. Which is interesting, because you're like, oh, what's your source text? Oh, no, honey, it's not. That's not the one you should be using. I say this because I many years ago I attempted, and I gave it up because it did not work. Attempted to write a Trojan War story. And therefore I have read extensively. I hunted down every last ancient source I could possibly lay my hands on, including one that hadn't been translated into English but had been translated into French. And I picked my way through 18th century French to read the passage that I needed. That's how committed I was. But ultimately it failed because I couldn't make them human beings. I was like, okay, fair enough. They're too old. They're too old and they're too archetypical to become human beings without diminishing them. And that I think was the important thing. It's like, okay, let's, as, what is it, Dirty Harry says, a man's got to know his limitations. Well, I found where my limitations were, because that failed horribly. A lot of that got folded into all of that stuff that I'd done ended up getting folded into my novel Poisoning the Nest. So I did use it, but nowhere near what I had used it. So anyway, that suffice it to say, I've kind of enjoyed watching them do this, and occasionally I'll put my 2 cents worth in, which people don't often have a comeback for that, which is always fun. But as I was saying, there was a point. I'm coming back to it. I know I do this a lot. I'm sorry. As I was saying, we argue and complain and especially with politics and squabble and in-group and out-group about things that ultimately, as individuals, we have no power over anyway. We have nothing in power over that. Occasionally we do. Occasionally you write a letter to your MP and everybody else had written a letter to their MP and you get something happen. So I'm not saying we are utterly powerless. This is not that sort of a bleak thing. It's not a disengagement from voting and things like that. No, you should absolutely engage. But what I'm saying is there is no point me in my country working myself up and becoming extremely upset about things happening on the other side of the globe. We're not built for that. And the only reason to do that is to distract ourselves from the important things in our own lives. So Jock McLeish learns what is important for actually having a good life. It's not too late for him, is what he learns. It's not too late. He's hit the point where he thinks he's at the worst point he could ever be. He is a terrible alcoholic. He realizes his employers are going to see this about him. He realizes this is going to lead to him being fired and ending his job in disgrace. He realizes that he has been a slave to economics, to money, to people's expectations, that he has warped and conformed his life to other people's expectations. He has made himself small so that other people can use him. And he realizes what he has neglected and what he has failed to see. I won't spoil the ending. The ending is really good. But it is a book about the way we distract ourselves. Is very much a book about male loneliness, male inadequacy, why men would feel inadequate in the world that they're in, how lacking emotional intelligence can have some pretty massive impacts, but at the same time, it's not anyone's fault that this person made these mistakes when he was young. His parents are working class people. His father is a First World War veteran. His mother is disappointed in her life. These are people who, because they are working class, because they are utterly dependent on people thinking good of them, are more concerned about respectability than whether they're actually happy. They don't know. They don't have time to know. They have bills to pay. Jock McLeish is similarly in that position. There is the greasy pole to climb. There are people to impress. There are regrets to avoid. And yet by the end, you have something completely different, a different world that he now gets to move into. So I would really recommend this. If you've been reading Alasdair Gray, you must read this. Again, like everything, we have religion, we have Scotland, we have politics in this. As always in Alasdair Gray. This one, I think it is definitely up there with Lanark and Poor Things. So I think this is probably, that would be the trio of books that if you were only going to read 3 Alasdair Grays, though I don't think you should only read 3 Alasdair Grays. I've got more and I'm going to be reading them. I'm eking them out. There's no more Alasdair Grays beyond what I've got, so I've got to eke them out. But it is a really interesting world. It's the world of a uniquely Scottish writer. Everything in his world is in Scotland. He is very Scottish. But if you're only going to read 3, this one, Poor Things, and Lanark. Read Lanark, this one, then Poor Things. Okay? It is very experimental. That central bit, it does help if you know that you've got 3 voices and you read them together in some way. Don't try to read them across the page. You actually have to read down the page, down the page, down the page. It takes a while to read those passages. You're reading 3 different columns. But But when you understand they're all speaking together, but they're all saying very discordant things to one another, is quite interesting. The use of typography in this book is really one of the things that makes it interesting. It's not just that central bit. That central bit is the bit that makes you go, whoa, what is this? But we've also had bits missing. We've had blank pages. The blank pages are obviously a nod to Lawrence Sterne and Tristram Shandy. He has nods to lots of other writers. They're all mentioned at the end in the epilogue. For the discerning critic, you have noticed lines in this book taken from Chaucer, Shakespeare, Johnson, the Book of Common Prayer, Goldsmith, Cowper, Anonymous, Mordaunt, Burns, Blake, Scott, Byron, Shelley, Campbell, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, Browning, Tennyson, Newman, Henley, Stevenson, Hardy, Yeats, Brooks, Owen, Hassick, in Parrott's translation slightly shortened, Kafka, Pritchett, Auden, Cummings, E. Jackson. So I will only list writers whose work gave me ideas for the bigger bits. And one of those is Lawrence Sterne, who we've done twice. I've read it twice now. Ladyship did it. So if you're in the mood for something experimental, and I mean genuinely experimental, I know a lot of things that say, oh, it's experimental, and it's like, no, it's not. It's Chinese boxes. It's Chinese boxes, and you try to confuse someone. That's not experimental. This is experimental. I don't even know how you typeset that. But it is experimental, and it's playful. And it's not... You would think that a book that has so much sex and sexual violence, they're fantasies, but, you know, some people may not like that. And I fully accept that you may not like to read a whole load of kind of pathetic porn. It's actually a really fun book. It is a fun book. It does keep you going with it. It took me a little bit of time to read because, as I said, we're writing, and the writing is taking kind of a lot of energy. So there's that element to that. But no, I really enjoyed this. Definitely up there of the ones that I've read. This is like one of the top 3 Alasdair Gray novels. You really must read it. If nothing else, it's not just a Scottish novel. It's a Glasgow novel. Again, like Lanark. Lanark is a Glasgow novel. Because I'd been looking at Peter Cook, when it mentions the Edinburgh Film Fringe Festival, and it mentions meeting these people from Oxford and Cambridge. They're meeting the Beyond the Fringe lot. Miller and Moore. He doesn't actually mention Cook and Bennett. And you realise as you're reading it, oh, that's Jonathan Miller they're talking to. That's Jonathan Miller, because Jonathan Miller, when you've spent a bit of time looking at the Beyond the Fringe, and Jonathan Miller in particular, it's like Jonathan Miller would talk like that. So that was kind of like this nice little Easter egg, at least for me. I'm not sure if anyone who else is going to pick up on that, but I certainly went, oh, that was fun. Do read it. I think it's really enjoyable. I can understand if you don't want to, but I think to be honest, the sexual stuff feels very it feels like kind of cheap 70s sexploitation stuff. It's like, yeah, it's not very nice, but I think there's worse stuff out there now, which is kind of awful to think of. But it's also these are the fantasies of a kind of pathetic little man. And there's certainly fantasies that he never would actually put into practice. They're all just in his head. So, you know, there is that element, but it might be off-putting, but that's the intent. It's design. I am keeping you at bay. I'm keeping you at arm's length. I'm trying to get you not to look at me. So, you know, that is it is part of the intent. So moving forward, I know we said we probably have some more books, but looking at how the writing's going, we're probably going to get a bunch more plays and films, more plays, because that's what we've got to actually read at the moment, is a bunch of plays. So you will be getting Her Infernal Majesty, and you will be getting Her Infernal Majesty with some really weird, obscure stuff. So look forward to that. I don't know when I'll be back. I'll be back as soon as I can. I don't know what I'll be back with. I don't know what Her Ladyship will be back with, or Otterline, or Laura, who I know you haven't seen for ages. We will try to come in when we can, but you may be getting Caesar and Hatter and Her Infernal Majesty, simply because of what we currently need to read to keep the book on target for our deadline. So it might be some really odd theatre. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Do pick up this one. It is really good. Alasdair Gray is really great. But anyway, I'll see you later. Peace and love, guys. Peace and love. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.